your normal 4th of July holiday travel weekend. Actually, things are going to be a little different not only on the roads, but on the boats as well. Let's talk to Bart Treece from DOT and Ian Sterling from the Washington State Ferries on what to expect.
Okay, so let's just jump into things here this morning. So we're coming up on a holiday, and Bart, I know you and I talked briefly before when we talked holiday traffic and, essential to non-essential travel and whatnot. But, last weekend, Bart, over the mountain passes, we saw delays upwards of an hour. What are we expecting going into this 4th of July weekend?
Yeah, this isn't a typical travel holiday. We haven't had one quite like this. 4th of July is typically a travel holiday, but we're coming in a strange time of year where folks are hitting the roads at certain points to recreate, but then we also have a patchwork of different phases from county to county of what's open and what's closed. So it really depends on what people do and where people go. And so we really don't have a good understanding of what to expect because, we know our previous 4th of Julys, but this is not a 4th of July travel holiday like we've seen in years past.
Sure. Now, Ian, we saw, I would say, since the beginning of the month, we've seen some pretty long wait times at the ferry terminals. Let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah, you were looking at 3 hours on the Michaelteo Clinton route as recently as this last weekend. And the reason for that is we're short-staffed due to COVID-19. And so we're running a reduced schedule. A lot of the routes that usually have 2 boats. So our biggest route traditionally would be Seattle-Bainbridge, Seattle-Bremerton. Those are down to about 50% of what they normally would carry as far as the boats go. So one boat is parked and we use the other boat. So it's one boat service. That now has made its way to Michaelteo Clinton and at one point also to Edmonds-Kingston. So those are busy Central Sound routes and it's catching a lot of people off guard.
So now, Ian, with, obviously with COVID, you guys are losing boats. Or losing employees because of COVID, not only just because of, financial reasons, but also for their, the health of your employees as well. So Bart, what about you guys on your end when it comes to just the roadways? Are you guys seeing the same effect that the ferries are seeing?
You mean with employees who are taking leave for medical reasons?
Correct.
We're looking at more about reducing staff right now for the furloughs this month. And so we've had to make some adjustments for folks in our TMC and also our incident response and maintenance crews. But we do have some availability for folks to be out on the road. But as far as the COVID, we're following health and safety plans. We're a little bit different setup than the ferry system. So it's kind of like comparing apples and oranges. But we all try to follow the same best practices and rules by public health departments and the CDC.
Okay, Bart. So now that we said that this is not a traditional, like 4th of July and whatnot. Now, I know that here in Western Washington, just Washington in general, you had mentioned we're all in different phases. So does the DOT here on the western side of the state, correspond with the eastern side of the state, and you guys work collectively when it gives and, passing along traffic information?
We do. And so we have different areas of the state. We talk to each other if there are incidents that we need to try to message farther upstream so people who are making that trip can know what to expect. And those were those highway message signs that are changeable. They've got electronic messages out there. Those are things that folks really need to keep an eye out for in case there's something that changes while they're on their route and they can make adjustments to their trip. Maybe it's pull over and take a break and have lunch, or maybe it's delaying their trip or taking another route. Those signs are really important for folks while they're on the road.
So Ian and Bart, I talked to NREX last week a little bit about trends and what they're seeing in the uptick of, not only passengers on the ferries, but also on the roadways right now. Ian, are you noticing more people are now jumping on the boats? Considering with the wait times and whatnot?
Yeah, there's no doubt that we've seen, we really cratered in ridership. Back a couple of months ago, went back to really the lowest ridership that we've seen since the 1950s when Washington State Ferries became a state agency. So that tells you, walk-on ridership down 90% at one point in time, vehicle ridership down 70%. We're seeing that creep back up for sure. And we really don't have the service to match the demand at this point in time for a variety of reasons. And one of those is crewing. We've got to have a certain number of crew on board to run the vessels according to the U.S. Coast Guard regulations. And that's why you see a lot of one boat service and reduced service on other routes. So whether you're going to Fauntleroy to Vashon or up into the San Juan Islands, you're going to find that there are boats off the route. Same story in Port Townsend and Coopville. There's only one boat operating there. There's usually two. So really reduced capacity right now. Walk-on passengers have not been much of an issue because people are mostly driving their cars on board. And actually we would, if you have to be on a ferry, would encourage you to drive your vehicle on board and then stay inside your vehicle. If you do go upstairs, it's mandatory masking all through the state of Washington, including on public transit. And that's both for our employees and for passengers as well.
Okay. Now, Bart, I mean, there's no question we're starting to see South King County kind of wake up a little bit, Pierce County wake up a little bit, and a lot more people on the roads. What are you guys seeing and what are you noticing?
It depends on where you go, but looking just at like 167 in Kent, we're seeing that back up to pre-COVID levels of traffic. But as you get closer to some of the urban areas like Seattle, you're still down around 20-something% in the Seattle metro area. So the outlying areas are seeing a little bit of a bounce back, but closer towards those inner city areas, they're still well below what we saw about this time last year.
And I feel like Snohomish County right now is not really showing much when it comes to pre-COVID levels of traffic.
It really depends on where you go and which route you take. But yeah, you're still seeing it below what we saw at normal levels about this time last year. And we're comparing 2019 to 2020 numbers. Those 2019 numbers, those were pre-COVID. 2020 numbers are well below. So again, it depends on where you go and what time of day. So you could still see some congestion on those various routes. We've had ramp meters that have kicked on in Snohomish County and in South King County to try to give that main line a better flow and keep fighting off that congestion. And so we're right about the ceiling of congestion before things reach that tipping point, and those backups and delays become something that folks notice a lot more of. So that's why those ramp meters are really important. It's really helping keep those mainline speeds at something that's really consistent for folks during those peak and daytime hours.
So let me ask you, just in general, how are you, do you think this is our new normal? Do you think this is where we're going to be till the end of the year when it comes to traffic volume?
It really depends. It's hard to predict. As the governor said, a lot of the response to this is more like a dial than a switch. And so depending on how the dial's turned, you're going to see demand and traffic respond in that same consistent way. So if you do switch the dial back, you're going to see a reduction in travel. And if you turn the dial back up, you'll probably see things bounce back up a little bit more quickly, depending on where you go.
And Ian, we've talked about this for years and years and years when it comes to the ferries and the boats and the vessels and the aging vessels. You guys have already had your fair share of problems with crab pots once again this year.
Yeah, everybody likes to talk about the crab pot entanglements, but believe it or not, it's been a couple of years since we've had real bad trouble with crab pots. And I'm crossing my fingers when I say this. What happens is people, usually beginner crabbers, we think, because you lose your gear if it gets run over by a state ferry or another big vessel. That crab pot will get run over, the rope will get wrapped around a propeller shaft, work its way into some seals, and that can cause a lot of damage to the point that sometimes the vessels have to come out of the water. And if that's the case, big boats, big problems, it's $100,000 plus just to get them out of the water and work on those. But again, we haven't seen that kind of damage in a couple of years. We partner very closely with the Fish and Wildlife Department and their enforcement unit, and that seems to have been successful. And again, I'm crossing my fingers here, but we've done a lot of education efforts, and there's also enforcement, and those two things coupled seem to have cut down on the crab pot entanglements. And okay, now I'll knock on wood and cross my fingers. So hopefully it stays that way. It's been a couple of years since we've had a lot of damage done. And if look, crab fishing starts, I believe, this week, right? In a lot of areas. And if that's, if you do go crab fishing, don't put your pot in front of the state ferry terminal. That should be pretty obvious, or out in the shipping lanes, really. And it's a good way to lose your gear. So it's self-policing for a lot of folks and just common sense. That being said, we do like to remind people. So thank you.
Fantastic. And Bart, as we kind of get into the weekend, what advice do you want to give drivers that are planning on hitting the roads?
it's really difficult to expect what will happen on the roads. It's not a typical travel holiday, even though it is Independence Day. So it's really key for folks to know before they go. Check the conditions before they head out the door. Make sure that you and your vehicle are ready for the road. So full tank of gas, make sure that you're not going to have any problems while you're out on the road. And planning ahead is really key. We may still see some construction off the side of the road. We don't have a lot of projects that are planning to work, but there could be a few here and there. So it's really important for folks, if they do see orange cones, orange barrels, orange construction signs, to pay attention and to follow those directions, because that's really in the interest of everyone's safety, the safety of the folks who are maybe working on the side of the road, but also for you as you're traveling through, because you really want to get to where you want, your destination on time, but you also want to do it safely. And also making sure that if you do hit the road, that you're in a condition to operate a vehicle safely, so free of impairment. If you're out having a good time, make sure someone who's responsible and who can operate that vehicle safely and without impairment is behind the wheel, and also free of distractions, cell phones, mobile devices. And then even if you're tired, don't get behind the wheel if you're sleepy or drowsy. Give yourself some rest, take a break, and make sure that when you're ready to hit the road, you're refreshed and alert and able to get home and safely in a reasonable amount of time.
And I think Rick Johnson and all the other Washington State troopers would be happy to hear me say, slow it down. My goodness, we have had our fair share of speeders out there. Ian, when somebody's going out to the boat for the long holiday weekend, what's your advice for riders?
Well, Bart's alluded to this. I mean, this is not a normal year. And people should not expect normal ferry service. I mean, if you can show me a transit agency or a mode of transportation that hasn't reduced its service, I'd be surprised, from airlines to the bus. I mean, that's how it is out there. And like I say, I think we've caught a lot of people off guard that don't take the ferries often, that come out and think it's going to be the same fun ferry ride from last year and they'll get to go to the galley and that kind of thing. No, the galleys are closed. So if you do travel, try to travel off peak. So early in the morning, late at night. That'll help your chances, but expect to wait in line. If you're traveling during those prime times, really beginning tonight and tomorrow evening, you're going to see a lot of people out and about, and the same story toward the end of the weekend as everybody comes back. And really that will spread into Monday and Tuesday as well. So the next week here, you can expect to wait in longer lines than probably you would like to, and you should consider that. And of course, follow us on our social media channels, sign up for rider alerts via our webpage. That'll help you out as well.
Don't forget to watch that mobile app. That's got both ferry and highway information. Thank you.
Yes, it does, and it comes in very handy. We're very fortunate here in the state of Washington to have such articulate and fun and really informative people at WSDOT. So Ian, Bart, once again, thanks again for your time. I certainly appreciate it. It's always so much fun to talk to you guys when it comes to transportation.
Yeah, good seeing y'all. Especially
your turn to give her the 50 this time.
Yeah, we want everyone to be safe, have a good weekend, and be smart about it if you are on the road and you have to travel. Again, not a normal weekend, but plan ahead and hopefully you'll have yourself a good, safe time.
Well, I'm not going anywhere, so I'll be around on social media too. So.